Mechanic says, "That's not my problem," to my vehicle issues, so I make it his problem. Some intro and backstory. My dad was a mechanic for 20 or more years, and for as long as I can remember, I drove him nuts because I'd go around the house with a screwdriver that he'd left out and take everything apart, because I wanted to see how it worked. As I grew older, I developed an affinity towards computers and electronics, which led me to be that kid in high school who changed his grades, crashed the school district's servers, and used the net-send command with great success. I'd spend my weekends either with my grandparents and uncle working on science projects, or dragging my dad outside to help me fix my car, which consisted of him telling me that he'd help once I got it taken apart. Those figure-it-out lessons were probably the greatest gift he could have given me growing up. I joined the US Army in March of 2004 and went into communications, or commo for short, where I managed to go from private, E1, when I joined, to sergeant, E5, by the time I returned from my deployment at the beginning of 2007. After returning home, I was subsequently transferred from a light infantry unit, walking everywhere, to a mechanized infantry unit, riding in an armored vehicle everywhere, and placed in charge of the battalion commo shop because the current person running the commo shop was scheduled to retire in a few months, and I was the only other NCO. This is where things got interesting and my great commo vs mechanics rivalry story starts. So, commo vs mechanics. As anyone else that was in the US Army can attest to, every Monday is, or was, Motorpool maintenance, which essentially means to make sure all the tanks, Bradley fighting vehicles, or anything else with a motor works the way it should. This included testing all the radios and communication equipment as well. If it didn't work, we filled out the maintenance forms with the correct shop and have them fix it. All the issues would be later consolidated into a report that the leadership team would review. If a review was on that report, the leadership team wanted to know why it wasn't fixed. I ran my shop using the same approach my dad taught me, which was, figure it out, and don't come to me with a problem unless you have a solution. One Monday morning, shortly after taking charge of the commo shop, one of my soldiers came to me with a problem that he couldn't figure out, and asked if I could come help him. I agreed and followed him over to the Bradley fighting vehicle that was giving him problems. After a few hours of troubleshooting, we finally traced the problem back to the Bradley's slip ring. We double and triple checked that indeed was the problem because 1. Slip rings in general have a low failure rate, and 2. It wasn't something we could fix on our own. It required help from the mechanics because the slip ring required taking apart the interior of the Bradley's turret to actually get to it. So I went to the mechanics to get their help so we could fix the problem. This is where I learned the mechanics didn't like the commo shop. I was essentially told by the motor chief to F off and the slip ring is a commo issue, and it's the commo shop's job to fix it, not theirs. I was annoyed at the response and tried to insist that we needed his help. However, I was promptly shut down and told to pound sand. At this point, I was beyond angry. I'd tried the official way. I even swallowed my pride and asked nicely. Both times I was crapped on. I decided I was going to play global thermonuclear war and teach him a lesson that neither he nor anyone else in his shop would forget. So I went to my guys and told them I'd be back in about an hour or two because I needed to run home and grab some stuff. When I got home, I went directly for the garage and started packing all the wrenches, impacts, and sockets that I could fit into my portable toolbox. I also loaded up the portable air compressor and any extension cords I could find, and made my way back to the Motorpool. Once I got back to the Motorpool, I had my guys locate every extension cord they could find around the office, because I could only find one in my garage, and I needed to help me run power out to the Bradley that we were going to have to fix ourselves. Meanwhile, I also had 2 of the guys run to HQ and find me 2 of the largest empty coffee cans they could find. I ended up having to tell them twice because the first time they thought I was joking. They couldn't understand why I needed a coffee can of all things. When they returned with the coffee cans, I had everything in place. I had power, compressed air, tools, and a place to neatly put all the bolts, nuts, and washers I was about to remove. Under normal circumstances, I would only remove the things that absolutely had to be removed. The fewer things that have to be put back, the better. But these weren't normal circumstances, and I had absolutely no intention of putting anything back together. It was about lunchtime, and I decided my way of fixing this issue probably wasn't the best example to set for my team. So I sent them to lunch and told them I'd handle this issue so they could focus on the other vehicles when they got back. For the next few hours, I proceeded to dismantle every single bolt I could find. I removed seats, interior plates, shelves, pretty much anything that wasn't electrical or commo related got removed. I'd then place all of the newly removed hardware in the coffee can. By the time I reached the turret, I'd filled up both coffee cans with nuts, bolts, and washers, so I had to go and find something else to start putting all this stuff in. Luckily, we had Ziploc bags by the dozen laying around the office. I grabbed a couple of those and went back to having fun taking apart the Bradley. I finally reached the slip ring and managed to luck out. I didn't have to replace the slip ring after all. Turns out the mechanics didn't install one of the cable mounts, and one of the commo cables got snagged and subsequently cut. It took me less than 15 minutes at that point to replace the cable and missing cable mount. Of course, the fact that I completely removed everything in the way helped, because now I didn't have to fish the cable through anything. Once I replaced the cable and made sure all of the other commo equipment worked, I figured while I'd taken everything apart, it would be much easier to fix any other problems they might be having. All commo systems checked out, my job was done. Everything that I'd taken out of the Bradley was then gently and neatly stacked in the interior of the vehicle. I put the lids on the coffee cans, zipped up the bags, pulled out my trusty Sharpie and wrote bolts on each of them. Once everything was tidied up, I went off to find the owner of the Bradley fighting vehicle and let him know his commo issue was fixed, but he should probably have a mechanic look at his Bradley because I had to disassemble some, and by some I meant most, of the vehicle in order to get to the part I needed to replace, and I couldn't remember how everything went back together. I stared out of my office window for the rest of the day, waiting for the mechanics to get around to looking at the Bradley. I still remember the reaction of the motor chief when he looked inside that vehicle, and if I didn't know any better, I could have sworn his head rotated around 3 times and damn near popped off. His reaction was absolutely priceless. I knew he was about to storm into my shop in a fit of rage, so I got up and decided it was probably best to meet him outside in Motorpool. As soon as I reached earshot distance, he started screaming and demanding I put the vehicle back the way I found it. However, I was having none of that. I simply shook my head and told him, "It's a mechanical issue now, and it's not my job. I asked for your help in the beginning, and I was told no because it, quote, wasn't your job. I'm just a commo guy. I didn't know what needed to be removed so I could fix the commo issue in the slip ring, so I removed everything. If someone from your team would have been there, I think this whole misunderstanding could have been avoided." That vehicle remained on the weekly report for the next 3 weeks while they figured out what bolts went where. After that incident, I was never told "it's not my job" ever again, and the mechanics were more than willing to help me fix any issues that came up. Once I managed to earn the respect of the mechanics and rebuild the bridges my predecessor burned, life was great. By the time I left the unit, we ended up starting to cross-train each other's team members so we could fix things faster as they came up. In short, needed help from the mechanics to replace a commo part in a tracked vehicle, mechanic told me it wasn't his job. So I took the entire vehicle apart, fixed my part, and made the reassembly his job. Am I the jerk? Yeah, I literally don't understand how that first part wasn't the mechanic's job. We need this mechanical component removed, please. This could have been an annoying fight to get to superiors and making everything into a long drawn-out hierarchical fight for everyone. And what we got is so much more entertaining than a bureaucratic war involving written complaints and chains of command, so we on the channel thank you for that, author. And you achieved your goals by trying the right thing, being rebuffed, and then following your instructions to the letter and achieving maximum destruction on the party standing in your way. And it sounds like it even worked for you. They knew that skiving off on work that was debatably their job would mean even more work that was definitely their job. Itty-bitty, frustrating bits of work with lots of swearing and being unsure of which bolts go where. So even if the head mechanic guy hated your guts for the rest of time, hopefully his team got assigned to you and worked out that you all weren't so bad. Magnificent jerkery from you on a bigger jerk in the name of achieving harmony. Inspiring stuff, really. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, linked below. Also, go to AmITheJerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. So I'm not allergic to strawberries. When I was younger, my favorite fruit was strawberries. I could eat pounds and pounds of them and not get sick. Unfortunately, they're also my mother's favorite fruit. Every time we'd buy some, she'd tell me to only eat half, since the other half were hers. Of course, being 6 years old and home alone, that didn't give me much good impulse control. So I ate all of the box. My mother whooped my butt and sent me to bed without dinner. I thought that was the end of it. Mother, on the other hand, decided she was sick of me eating all the strawberries in the house. She decided she was going to stop me from eating them once and for all. So she decided to change the detergent and do all of my laundry. Now, I have very sensitive skin and I'm allergic to a lot of things, including fragrances. I break out into hives when I deal with an allergen, so she changed the detergent to a very abrasive one to get back at me. The next day, I broke out in hives at school and fainted. Mum wasn't done then. She took me to the doctor for a blood test since we were still trying to figure out if I was diabetic, and told me that the doctors think I'm allergic to strawberries. This was devastating. I was told that it could have been worse and that I could have died from even a little bit. It's been about 14 years since I've had even a single bite of strawberry. I barely remember what they taste like. However, I found out all of this at a sudden family party when introducing my boyfriend. I told him about how I can't have strawberries for dessert. My mum walks up, looks at me funny. Of course you can, you're not allergic. The second I reminded her, she began to laugh. Oh, you were never allergic. I found out the rest from my dad. Thanks, Mum. Hate you too. As an afternote, my mum is not a terrible person. She's a little bit mentally unhinged, but she does her best with what she has. She thought this was the best way to teach me a lesson, and it did. It's not the best way to go about it, however. I fainted not because of the hives, but because I had forgotten to eat my snack, according to my dad. I was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes when I hit that age. Second, we were a poor family who couldn't afford childcare. My cousins lived in the apartments above us, and my mother worked at the grocery store that was a 5 minutes walk even when I was 6. She was our only provider due to my dad's jerkishness. When we finally moved for her new job, we got childcare, but I was too old for that by then. The big deal was that when I was taking away all the treats in our house for myself. That's why my mother was upset. We rarely got anything sweet, let alone fresh fruit, and that's why I went crazy about it. Well, look, your mum definitely isn't in the clear in the narrator's books, but then again, I can imagine my mum would be livid if 6-year-old me ate all of the treats that she occasionally brought for herself. I don't know that she'd have done something that would have caused me to, break out in hives and potentially faint, but I would have been in very clear and direct trouble. I'm a little worried about the fact that the kid fainted regardless of what the dad claims about the snacking, but as with all of these, I wasn't there. Honestly, punishments like this and the butt-whooping that our author received seem pretty typical of a lot of boomer stories about what their parents did to punish them. If I heard about modern parents doing this, with our wealth of information on the long-term effects on children's psyche, I'd be wondering if I should call social services. Try to scam my dad out of £20,000? Prepare to have regulators on your case and pay through the nose. So this happened a couple of years ago. My dad occasionally sends money back to his home country via these money transfer companies, and he'd recently sold his shop, so he wanted to send some of the money back home. Now, my dad isn't the most savvy of people, and me and my brother regularly have to keep an eye on him to make sure he doesn't get scammed. We were a bit worried when he said he wanted to send such a large amount of money in one go, and suggested using a bank to do it. While it would cost a fair amount in fees, it would be legit and it would arrive on time. However, he wanted to go with this money transfer company that he saw an ad for in the newspaper, as they had lower fees and promised the money would arrive in a week or so. So we accompany him to the shop and discuss how much it would cost and when it would arrive, and the guy gives his best assurances that the money will arrive and gives a good price, and of course we pay him the money and leave. We weren't stupid enough to pay in cash and have no trace whatsoever. We took precautions and paid by debit card, so there's a trace in case he tries anything funny. So a couple of days goes by and Dad periodically checks his bank account back home and checks if the money arrived, and of course, we say things like, "Give it time, it'll come soon." After 2 weeks of still nothing, he calls up and asks what's going on. The guy says it's just delayed, but nothing to worry about, so Dad hangs up satisfied. A week later, another call and another excuse. We think, okay, this is irritating but fair enough, and not much we can do but be patient. More time goes by and the excuses are now getting less professional. Now it's, oh, we had to use the money you gave us to pay off the previous guy who sent money, so when the next guy pays, you'll get yours. At this point, we're getting seriously worried and thinking, what the frick? Is this guy going bankrupt or something else? We investigate all of our options with the bank and seeing if we can do any claimbacks, as it wasn't a fraud case and my dad paid willingly, so it's not their problem. We go to the shop to have a conversation with the guy and see if he actually plans on paying up or not, and give him one last chance for benefit of the doubt, and of course he gives us the same BS assurances, and still no money transfer 2 weeks after the meeting. So now begins the revenge that you've been waiting for. In the UK, all financial organisations, no matter how small, are heavily regulated by government authorities. And if you run a business to do with money, they'll be watching you carefully. My brother, being a banker, knew exactly which authorities to contact and he launched a complaint against this organisation. He sent them proof of payment and explained to them how they refused to send the money. Within a couple of days, they came down hard on him. Now, instead of my dad chasing him, this guy started chasing after my dad, begging him to withdraw the complaint as it was affecting his business, as the regulator was threatening investigations and a possible shutdown. The guy kept saying he'll send the money soon, but please withdraw the complaint. Of course, we knew that as soon as the complaint was withdrawn, it would be near impossible to recomplain, so we refused to withdraw until he paid up with the compensation, of course. We also made sure that all the correspondence was made through the regulator as he tried to call up my dad and get him to withdraw the case with his sob stories, which we also mentioned to the regulator. After he realized he wasn't getting anywhere, he eventually paid up the full 20 grand and a further £1,500 in compensation for all the distress he caused, and a letter of apology to my dad, and the case was withdrawn. He has scammed other people like my dad with his business, but as they weren't educated enough to go to the regulator with a complaint, he must have gotten away with a lot over the years. So it felt good to make him realize that he can't mess with everyone he perceives to be an easy target. In short, Dad tried to send 20 grand back to his home country via a money transfer company. The guy wouldn't pay up after taking the money, so he sent the regulator after his butt and got him to pay the full amount plus £1,500 compensation. Look, don't get me wrong, I'm glad that this absolute con artist had to pay more than £1,000 extra, but I seriously hope that you didn't actually withdraw the complaint. Or that, given that the agents involved normally take this kind of thing really seriously, that they didn't let you withdraw it. Because letting creeps like this continue their shifty enterprises really is no good. Honestly, if he'd screwed you around that much and given you vague, unprofessional excuses, I would advocate for doing the same thing to him. Oh yep, sorry, we'll get around to removing the complaint soon, I promise. He deserves no better. I'm sure that he's scammed people out of their money before and will continue to do so if allowed. When the lawyer steps in to make everything better. Worked a decade as a salesman at a stereo shop. I've had hundreds of people threaten to sue, and not a single one has. A few stand out, and I was just reminded of this gem. I sold a kid, 18 or 19 years old, a speaker, and mentioned it has a manufacturer's warranty against defects. If it's not working, we just swap it out. The kid comes back later that day and says the speaker doesn't work and he wants a warranty replacement. I open the box and the speaker has a gaping hole in it. He was screwing it in, slipped, and put the entire drill bit and chuck through the speaker cone. It's obvious what happened. The shape and position of the hole, the fact that not all of the screw holes had marks from being used, among other things. I gave him a, I'm sorry, but this clearly has physical damage and not a manufacturer defect. I can't use the warranty about this. He debates, I hand him the warranty information from the manual, he reads it and accepts his fate. It specifically notes damage due to improper installation, accident as not being covered. The kid walks out with his destroyed speaker. Half an hour later, his parents are in the shop screaming that they're going to sue us, it's our responsibility to replace, it has a warranty, that we'd formed a verbal contract with our client, the kid, that we'd swap it out if there was an issue. Dad mentions he's a lawyer a few times during his tirade. I ask, "Sir, have you read the warranty information?" "No, that doesn't matter." And I cut him off to say, "So you're not a lawyer then?" "Of course I am. Are you accusing me of lying?" Lawyers always read a contract before debating it. Misrepresenting yourself as an attorney in order to obtain benefit for another is a criminal offense, sir. I point out the cameras and mention they have audio. This guy went silent, looked a bit shocked, and walked out with his broken speaker, muttering something about how he's never coming back. My manager leaned over and asked, "Is that true? Is it illegal to impersonate a lawyer?" I said, "Damned if I know." So, I'm not a lawyer. Am I a jerk, though? Jerk vigilante. So I don't think not doing your due diligence discriminates you from being a lawyer, it just makes you a lousy one. But the thing is, if you are a lawyer, you probably have a good idea of general consumer protection laws. Luckily, this idiot dad's front caved pretty easily. I do feel for the kid though. I sympathize with saving up all of your pocket money for something and then immediately breaking said thing. Especially when you've saved for weeks for said toy or Warhammer model. Oh boy. All the trauma is flooding back to me. Time to go before you all hear a grown man weep. Have a nice day, folks. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories. Or if you want to check out some great music, check out easymode.com. If you like Am I the Jerk, give Am I the Genius a shot. Everything linked in the description.